About 7 to 9% of Canadian seniors 65 plus live with dementia, with Alzheimer's being the most common type, 60 to 70% of cases. This translates to roughly 400,000 to 500,000 people, with numbers rising. For instance, around 8.7% of those 65 plus had dementia in 2024, and projections suggest over 1.7 million Canadians could have it by 2050. Caring for a loved one suffering from Alzheimer's is a long and emotional journey. Support for the whole family walking through this is so important. I'm Julie Stautland, and welcome to A Healthy Dose. Today, we will hear Shelly Calcagno's personal journey, watching her mother live with Alzheimer's. In fact, she's written a book about her experience to help other families and caregivers. It's entitled The Longest Goodbye. So, Shelly, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks for
And
having
here's
me.
your book, The Longest Goodbye.
Yes.
So I'm thrilled. I cried reading it, and whoops, and I'm dropping it on the floor. But I wanted to ask you first and foremost, I think it's important to know a little bit about you and your background, because you have done so much.
Oh, so I have a background in church and family ministries. I worked as a pastor for many years. Then I worked in media for a little while. We worked together in the past. And I love to write and blog, and I have a podcast. And I currently work with Compassion Canada, so a wonderful organization that I'm just really proud to be part of. So yeah.
Yeah, and we did, my husband and I did in the past too, so we have that in common as well.
Yes.
And you're incredibly creative, and you know
Thank
how to
you.
put on great events.
Thank you.
And actually, the list could just keep going on and on and on.
Thanks.
So, but I want to ask you, with this book, The Longest Goodbye, what are you hoping to have as the biggest impact for people?
I wrote this book because in my own Alzheimer's journey with my mom, there was just so many times that I felt really alone
Okay.
and I didn't know where to turn to. And I remember probably maybe 4 or 5 years in, I started, blogging a little bit, sharing
Yeah.
some stories about what I was going through, and people really started to respond. And I just realized that this was an area where, people were going on this
Yeah.
similar journey, and there was not a lot of resources out there that offered hope and encouragement. So obviously, I walked through a really hard, painful journey, but I also
Yeah.
found hope and gifts in that journey too. So I wanted to create a book that would help people on their own journeys and bring them encouragement too.
So let's talk a little bit about your family background,
Mhm.
because before your mom, you have your family history
Mhm.
starting with this.
Yes, on my mom's side of the family, my grandfather had Alzheimer's. She
Okay.
had two brothers that were lost as
Two
well
brothers.
to Alzheimer's, and then her. So, yeah, it's definitely a familiar journey in
Yeah.
our family. So,
So you
yeah.
didn't have just your mother, you had it. So that's four people in your
Hmm.
family.
Hmm.
Now, with you as a child, like how old were you when your grandfather got Alzheimer's?
I was probably a young teenager when
Yeah.
he was walking through that. Our family lived quite far in Newfoundland, so
Okay.
we weren't up close and personal to that
Mm-hmm.
journey and what they were going through because we just weren't there
Okay.
as often. So until I walked closely with my mom, I didn't really fully understand
Yeah.
everything that was ahead that we were going to go through.
So when you did meet your grandfather and he was
Hmm.
in those later
Yeah,
stages as a teenager, how did
yeah.
you try to still connect with him?
Yeah, it was hard. I remember feeling a little bit of fear because I didn't really quite understand.
Yeah.
I remember there was one time, probably the last time that we visited, and I was just, sitting with him on the
Mhm.
couch. And during the visit, we'd been trying to make connections. And I remember
Yeah.
that day he whispered my name. And I just remember it was just like so.
Right?
I remember like, running to my mom and I was like, he knows my name. He
Oh,
remembered my name. And that was just so significant to me. And that,
oh yeah.
especially since I didn't see him very often, to know
Yeah.
that he still remembered me was just really impactful
Oh,
in my
oh
life.
man. Yeah, that it definitely would be.
Yeah.
So how did well, I mentioned that about how your grandfather's diagnosis, but then as you had an uncle, how did it change as you now are like, okay, you went through this with your grandfather, but now you have an uncle. How did you feel you responded to their diagnosis, and
Mhm.
how were you able to relate to them?
Yeah, my mom was still well when those diagnoses
Mm,
happened, and so I remember her being so devastated
yeah.
that more, people in her family that she loved so much,
Yeah.
were walking through that, and I think there was always I don't know if there was a fear, but, when it's so
Yeah,
prevalent in a family, you start to think, is this going to be something that we might have to face someday too?
exactly. All right, stay with us and we'll be sharing about Shelly's mom's journey. I'm not sure anyone is ever prepared to receive a diagnosis. Somehow the news always seems to hit us full force. I know it has with me. So, with that in mind, Shelley, what were some of the first signs that you noticed from your mom? I know in your book you wrote about yellow flowers.
Yeah, that's the first chapter of the book. It's really the moment we kind of realized we were at my parents had a cottage, and my brother was just out in the yard with my mom. It was springtime. We were just doing our annual cleanup, and
Hmm.
there were dandelions all over the lawn. And my mom was trying to communicate about them, say something about them, and she couldn't find the word, so she kept calling them yellow flowers. And my brother just had this thought in his mind, he noticed her struggling, and so
Hmm.
that was kind of the first time that we realized that, perhaps some of her memory was being
Yeah.
lost. Yeah.
Then you shared about what it was like going shopping, and you always
Mhm.
had your annual shopping trip. Tell us
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, with Alzheimer's, it's such a progressive journey, so
Mm.
there's just little things you notice in the beginning.
Yeah.
I know one year we would go to the mall every Christmas, and
Hmm.
I would help her do her shopping. It was our fun day. She'd buy all the stuff for the grandkids, and I just remember this one day that we were shopping, and she couldn't find her bank card, and then when she would
Wow.
find it, she wouldn't be able to put in her PIN number. And I just remember as the day went on, I just started feeling sicker and sicker to
Yeah.
my stomach, and she didn't remember what she had bought already. And then at the end of the day, we were in the parking lot, and she had no idea where her car was. And I just remember being terrified when we did find her car and she
Yeah.
left. I was like, is she going to be able to get home? So
Yeah.
that was
It's a
kind of
real
when,
fear. It's a real
yeah,
concern.
yeah. And at every stage, there were just different things
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Like I know
she would
you also
lose.
mentioned about like when she would come back, would always love to give you gifts and how she bought the same perfume more
Yes,
than
yeah.
once.
Yeah, just little things
Little
like that
things
you
like that.
notice that are something's not quite
Yeah.
right. There's something a little bit off.
So when did you feel as a family it was time to have that conversation?
Yeah, it was really hard for us. I think at first we were all in denial. Like
Yeah.
we had the best mom. She was incredible, and
She was amazing.
yeah, and we just didn't even want to consider that this was going to be our journey. So
Mm.
at the very beginning, it was really hard to talk about. It's almost like we didn't want to say
Yeah.
it out loud at all. But we did have to have those conversations. And I
Mm.
remember early on, we went to the Alzheimer's Society together, my dad and my two
Mm.
brothers, and that was just such a like that was a traumatic day for me. Just it
Yeah.
felt real,
Mhm.
because we were seeking out some help and advice, and just wondering what the journey ahead was going to be like for us.
Yeah. Now you mentioned Alzheimer's Society.
Mhm.
Did they what kind of resources
Mhm.
did they have? Like
Yeah,
any
they're a wonderful organization. You can go in for support.
Yeah.
I always encourage people if they think their loved one is starting this journey, they're the best place to start. They have support groups. They'll send people to your home to help do assessments. They really care
Okay.
about people and families. Yeah, and they really helped our family along the whole journey for sure.
Oh, that is great. You mentioned in the book that you reached out to the Alzheimer's
Mhm.
Society, like we talked about, and that they have family supports and that. Do they connect you to other counselors
Mhm.
as well, or do they help you with any possible forms of treatment, anything new or research as well as too?
Yeah, they really, I feel their focus for us anyway was just really putting
Mm,
support in place for the family. And then, it's quite a process to get into long-term care homes as well. So
right.
they help you
Okay.
start those processes at an
So if you're
early
coming in
stage.
blind, it's kind of like,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
here's
Yeah.
some
And
things
they
that we
can help
can.
set up personal support workers for
Oh,
your loved
that's
one.
really
So,
important.
yeah, they just really help, and I think what's so valuable is the assessments they do, and they just try
Yeah.
to they follow you along the way in that sort of support, and, yeah, I think it's really important. I think, if people can reach out to them early and not wait till they were in crisis
Right.
mode, it's really good because they can just help you in the early stages where
And I read a little bit too
yeah.
that I didn't understand that there's like 7 stages and they kind of break it into 3, but they have like 7 stages and
Mhm.
that you see different things. And so it is the education's important. And if
Yes.
they're there to help you with that, that
Yeah,
is fantastic.
absolutely. Yeah.
So, I mean, I know you don't know much about this, but do you know of any medical support, any treatment? Have you heard of anything?
Um, there's often, different reports of new breakthroughs in the
Yeah,
news. There's no cure for Alzheimer's.
right.
There's definitely treatments that can be used to help slow the process.
Mm,
I don't know a lot about that in
yeah,
a lot of depth, but
yeah,
yeah, I think really providing the care and support around the family
is the
and the
most important.
caregiver is just so important.
Right. All right. When we come back, we will discuss the eventual journey into long term care. So stay with us. The Alzheimer's Society of Canada explains how there are 7 stages to Alzheimer's, ranging from stage 1 with no memory problems to stage 4 with mild or early onset Alzheimer's to stage 6 with severe or late stage Alzheimer's disease. Education is key to ensuring what treatment options or care is available at each stage. And before the break, we did mention about how the Alzheimer's Society is very, very helpful for so many of those unanswered questions, especially when you first find out. So now, Shelly, I want to ask you, how would you rate for your mom the level of care received from our healthcare system as a whole? What report card grade? Because people are always asking me, what is our system doing right and what is our system doing wrong, or what could be done better? So
Mhm.
in your personal journey, what was it like?
Yeah, I feel like we were really supported well.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah, I would say, no system is perfect. I
Mm,
remember there were some times we had to take my mom into emergency for certain
okay.
things, and emergency departments are
Yeah,
a nightmare for
they
people
are a
with
nightmare.
Alzheimer's. It's so scary, it's so overwhelming, you know, it's just a really hard to
I remember you
navigate.
reading that about that, and I actually didn't think about that. But
Mhm.
when you try to put yourself in their shoes, the confusion, the
Yes.
sound, the
Yeah.
people, the busyness, I never
Yeah.
actually thought about
Yeah.
how that could be overwhelming.
Yeah. But, that's just the nature of what an
Mm,
emergency room is.
yeah,
But overall, I really feel like my mom got wonderful support, from her healthcare
from your health,
physicians. Yeah. And from, the Alzheimer's Society, the Long-Term Care
yeah,
Association, I feel like I
and
don't know.
home
Yeah.
care, and
Yeah. Everything like that was,
that is great to
yeah.
hear. That is
Yeah.
wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
So, what was it like to finally have to come to the
Mhm.
point where, okay, the day you realized that your dad wasn't able
Mhm.
to continue having your mom at home,
Yeah.
what talk to us about that journey, because so many people, they're not ready for that,
Mhm.
and they don't know. Sometimes it's hard for them to really realize it is actually time. What
Mhm.
was your personal experience with your dad and your family realizing, okay,
Mhm.
we do have to look into long-term care now?
Yeah. So my mom was on a list for quite a while.
Was she?
Yeah, and my dad's incredible. He took care of her so well.
Yeah.
He just did everything he could to keep her home as long as he
Wow.
could. But when her spot opened up, it really was time for her to go in. She needed more care than
Mm,
he could provide, and it was such a heart-wrenching experience. And I don't think I've ever heard anyone before share their experience, what that's like. And for me,
yeah.
it was taking, our mom from her home where she lived for,
Yeah.
30 years and having to bring her to a strange place and leave her there. It was just like, I think every day for probably a month, I would just sob the
Yeah.
whole way home, just thinking of her in this place that wasn't her home. So it was a really hard transition for us
Well,
in the
and
beginning.
knowing your mom and how
Mhm.
full of life she was, and
Yeah.
how you write about how she tended to her
Mhm.
gardens, and how the amount of love and planting her flowers,
Mhm.
and making everything so pretty and homey and loving. So
Yeah.
it's to say, okay, I have to remove you from that
Yeah.
because it's for your best.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. It was hard, but after a while, I really grew to love and appreciate where she was. At first, I remember
Ah,
we would walk around and there was signs like home, this is, and I would be
yeah,
like, no,
yeah.
this is not her home. But after a while, I just came to appreciate that, she did need more care. My
Yeah.
dad did need a break. He couldn't
Yeah.
manage it all himself anymore. And, there were people there who loved her and took care of
Mhm.
her and did such a great job. So it took a while. And we tried to make her room her and we tried to
Yeah.
celebrate her still there. So it was definitely a hard transition. But it's so funny, after she passed, I really missed going there.
Oh,
Like, I
wow.
just, because that did become,
Yeah.
her home for, the last couple of years of her life. And yeah,
It's
yeah.
so wonderful that even though it was difficult to get her in there,
Mhm.
like, because then you write about it was also during COVID, and I
Mhm.
know what that was like because I had
Yeah.
to drop off my daughter at the hospital for an operation going,
Yeah.
"Bye, see you later." So I can't even imagine, like, you weren't even allowed in at that point just
Yeah.
to make sure she was nicely settled
Yeah.
until later.
Yeah.
So it was wonderful that in the end it turned out
Mhm.
so amazing.
Mhm.
I've only got a few seconds left here, but, did it take long for her to get that spot?
She got on a list at the right time.
Was
So,
it
and
several
they
months? A year?
no, it's probably a year and a
Oh,
half,
okay,
and
so
the
quite
good
good.
thing is they're following along with your progression,
Okay.
so they know when you're ready to go,
Right.
and so,
Okay.
that's why getting in the system is really important.
Really
Yeah.
important. All right. Okay. We will wrap up our conversation with ways to encourage caregivers and loved ones experiencing this difficult and many times lonely journey back after this. Shelley writes in the foreword of her book, and I keep asking the question, how do we love through the hardest days, through the pain and loss? And Shelley, let's talk about that. I wanted to ask you because that is such a big question.
Mhm.
How do you love through the pain and the loss through those hardest days?
Mhm. I think for me, I decided early on that uh, at the end of this journey, I didn't want to look back with any regrets at all.
Mm,
And I decided and realized and knew that I had the most incredible mom.
yeah.
And so I wanted to celebrate her through this no matter what, and I wanted to be there. So I just did that, and it wasn't always easy, I never
No.
want to sugarcoat that, this was, I just decided it was going to be okay, and it was hard.
Mm,
But we celebrated her birthdays.
yeah.
We decorated her room at Christmas in the home. We put roses up on her wall all around her, like just those things,
Yep.
just looking for joy in everyday moments when the whole situation is hard. That's what really carried me through. And I feel like I can look back now and I
Yeah.
can know that, we made the most of everything that we could with her.
Hmm.
Up until the very end, she was surrounded by love,
Yeah.
surrounded by our love.
Now you think about the family, you think about, how closely you were involved in her
Hmm.
journey and seeing her constantly and everything. It's tiring. It's
Hmm.
it's exhausting.
Yeah.
How did you take care of yourself? Because self-care as a caregiver is so important if
Hmm.
you're going to hang in there for the long run and be able to continue to pour into them and to others around you who are also trying to do well on this journey. What are
Yeah.
some things that you can share about self-care?
Yeah, for me personally, I started going to see a counselor.
Hmm.
I just made sure that I had definite things in my life
Yeah.
that I love to do, in the middle of all of this. And even for me, like I wasn't her primary caregiver either. My father was the
Yeah.
primary caregiver. So for him, it was really important for him to be able to get out sometimes, to
Right.
spend some time with some friends. Often I would go to visit my mom, but I would also go because I knew
You
that
gave him a
he needed
break.
to get out. Yeah, like
Yeah.
go do something you love, go for a walk,
Yeah.
go spend time with friends, do something for yourself. I just think that's so important to get
It really
support
is.
around you so that you can make time for yourself, just so you don't burn out.
I love what you mentioned here in your book to focus on moments,
Hmm.
not mountains.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah. Well, at the beginning of the journey, there was a time where I could just only see this big mountain of Alzheimer's.
Yeah,
And that,
I can imagine. I
yeah,
would see it like that too.
yeah, it's like this seems like a really big thing ahead of us. And it was a really big thing. But I thought, you know what, I can be overwhelmed and live in
Yeah,
a state of overwhelm through this
right.
whole journey, or I can just take it one day at a time.
Yeah.
And, what are the moments I want for this, for this season where she is? What are we going to do
Mhm.
now? How are we going to just, take things one day at a time? Of course, looking
Yeah.
ahead and planning, but also trying to be really present in what
Yeah.
was happening because I just felt like that was really present. I didn't want to check out and just become numb. I just wanted to be present. I wanted to
Yeah.
love the best that I could, even when days were really, really hard.
Well, that you talk about that too, like the kind of like the play on words here, like presence, gifts and
Mhm.
presents, but what's more important is presence, being
Yes.
present with the
Yeah.
person and how
Yeah.
that makes such a difference.
Yeah. There was a time when, myself or my brothers or my dad, we would just be sitting with my mom, and she wasn't able to communicate very well,
Yeah.
but every once in a while, she would just say, "You and me, you
Oh,
and me," and it was just that she knew we were there.
yeah.
She knew we were together, and she couldn't say everything she wanted to say, but,
But there
to
was
me,
the
it was like, yeah,
connection.
she was saying, "I know you're with me. I know I'm
Yeah.
not alone.
Yeah.
We're together." So,
Oh, I
yeah.
love that. So I love this too because I've used it myself and I've heard it from so many other people. What is the impact of telling yourself you can do hard things?
Yeah. Sometimes that's a motto in my life. Yeah, because here's the reality of life. Everything's not always gonna be sunshine and
No.
roses. Um, and fortunately, we don't always have to live in darkness and despair either. I feel
Yeah.
like there's this middle ground that God
Yes.
calls us to. And,
Mm,
there's hard days, there's good days. How do we survive in the middle? And I believe that
that's
we can do
great.
hard things. And for me, I've gotten through things like that just because of my faith and my trust in God, and just knowing that
Mm,
he's with me in all of these seasons. He's with me right in that middle of what I've sometimes called like this glorious mess of life. And we're all there.
I love it.
We're all going to be there at some time. So, yeah, just meeting God there for me.
I hope you have found Shelley's personal journey with her mom's diagnosis of Alzheimer's encouraging and informative. No one should have to walk this journey without education and support. Remember to advocate for your health and see you next time on A Healthy Dose.